Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be joining the Connecting Days today to talk about Ethiopia. My name is Olivier POUJADE. I am the chairman and co-founder of East Africa Gate, which is a consulting firm specialized on the Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti for investments. We've been operating for more than 8 years in Ethiopia and supporting a lot of European investors from Canal+, to Le SAF, going through JCDecaux, Lagardère, Peugeot. Today, I was invited to talk to you a little bit about the challenges and opportunities in investing in Ethiopia. I would like to share some experience of investments in Ethiopia and also some experience related to finding distribution channels. What you have to know is Ethiopia is indeed an amazingly attractive market on the continent, being the second most populated nation on the continent, but also having shown double-digit growth for close to a decade, and changing from an image that was extremely controversial in the 80s to what was until recently a real African success story on the model of Asian countries. This doesn't mean that the country itself is quite easy to approach. Ethiopia, having been disconnected from the world during the communist time and then never been colonized before. It is only the past 20 years, 25 years that the private sector has really emerged. And the way to do business in Ethiopia could be sometimes a bit challenging for people who come for the first time in the region. The three main challenges today in investing in Ethiopia are clearly related to the regulatory framework, logistic and finance access. Not talking about challenges specific to the location of the investment and potentially the sector. Regarding regulatory framework, until 2020, we were under the 2012 regulation for foreign investor. That was an extremely restrictive regulation with a list of sector open to foreign investor. Which were basically around 100 sectors, total over 1,600 type of licenses available. So it was very, very limited. And it was also quite archaic way of handling FDIs, foreign direct investment in the country. Today, it's slightly different because in 2020, the government has introduced two new pieces of regulation, one proclamation for investment and its regulation to clarify the details. And now we have reversed the way to approach to sector and FDIs, because now you have a a black list and a gray list, meaning the list of sectors that are not open and the one for joint venture with locals, and all the rest is open. So we move from maybe 150 sector open to more than 1,000 opportunities. On top of that, the new regulation is allowing the Ethiopian Investment Commission, which is a commission, so the equivalent to the ministry in charge of foreign investment, to take care of full cycle of company operation and not only just the registration. Added to that, we just saw, and it's very recent, and we're talking about a few weeks back, a new commercial code, which was much needed because the previous one was a commercial code dating from the 60s, from the imperial regime under Haile Selassie. So you can imagine the modernity of the provisions at that time. Now today we have something that's more adapted, that is even bringing the possibility to have things like a board of director for private limited companies, which are the one of the most common form of investments in Ethiopia. So all these text modification are really improving the business climate today. But please note that Ethiopia remains in the bottom list. I think we're around 140 something or 130 something in terms of doing business for the World Bank rating. So there is still a long way to go, but we can see that things are being implemented to move forward. And we are expecting that Ethiopia joins WTO in the coming 2 years, as it is clearly shown there is proactivity in terms of negotiation and moving forward with the organization of WTO. For logistics, the main challenge is that Ethiopia is a landlocked country since the separation with Eritrea. And as such, most of the cargo, we're above at 90% above 90% of the cargoes that the country needs is going through a very small country, which is Djibouti, which is basically acting as quite an efficient channel, but still a bottleneck for a country of, like I said, 110 million inhabitants with fast growth rates. So Ethiopia is trying to diversify access to other locations, trying to access to port in Somaliland, Berbera, trying to get access to at least depending on the geopolitical situation, to have a better access to Port Sudan, and also potentially to develop access to Massawa and Assab, which are the two main ports of Eritrea. They're also been making better access, road access to Kenya, to try to access to Mombasa, but the road is quite long and not as easy to use for logistics as others. And then obviously the logistics cannot be really improved if there is not an opening. And up to recently, a couple of years back, the logistics sector was 100%. When you use multimodal, meaning more than one type of transport, which is always the case coming to Ethiopia, meaning you have a bit of shipping and a bit of road trucking between Djibouti and Addis or Mojo Port, then it's a monopoly from Ethiopian Shipping Line, the public company, with the impact it has in terms of being also a bottleneck and also the difficulties dealing with a state-owned enterprise. Recently they have eased a little bit because it was a sector that was 100% restricted to local investor, and the law has changed, and we are now at 49% shareholding allowed for foreigners in the sector, and it has brought quite interesting international operators in the sector, including for the French side, Bolloré, CMA CGM. And it's very fresh news. In a discussion last week with the Minister of Finance, we were informed that this sector is going to be open more to foreign direct investment. So we can expect maybe a majority stake potentially for foreign investor in logistics that will obviously trigger more competition and improve the logistics system and the supply chain. Financially speaking, it's maybe the biggest of the challenges that the country is facing today. So the country is currently in need of import of more than $10 billion a year. We're even above $13 billion a year, while the export of Ethiopia are in the few billions in terms of value, single digits, and the rest is completed by FDIs, foreign direct investment, remittance from diaspora, and also a lot of international assistance and financing, like IMF has done recently with a $2.9 billion commitment to Ethiopia to be disbursed in tranches. As such, Ethiopia is facing, I would say, permanent liquidity issue in foreign currency and recurring liquidity issue in local currency also, which makes of any banker when you operate in Ethiopia, not your banker or service provider, but your business partner. So it's very important to know that dealing with a banker in Ethiopia is not dealing with someone who is just detached from your operation, but it's really dealing with someone who has to understand what you do and with whom you need to have a close relationship to develop your operation, because they can really limit the way you can grow and do business. The government is obviously extremely aware of the situation. And in order to tackle that, I mentioned the IMF, International Monetary Fund, lending of $2.9 billion. This is against, obviously, commitment to invest into structural macroeconomic reforms that will help stabilize the issue of foreign currency. And the government has, in return, committed to float the currency, because today it's not floating, but it's restricted and state controlled in terms of exchange. But to float the foreign currency, what we expect as a date is 2022, so it's getting close. How does it work today in this kind of very restrictive environment? Apart from some exceptions, which are using your own foreign currency if you have some in stock, most of the time, and not talking obviously about royalties payment and smaller type of payment, most of the transactions have to be done through a letter of credit or cash against documents that have to be logged as a request at your commercial bank and as to queue depending on the quality of your claim, meaning the priority of the sector in which you want to act. If you want to import, obviously, anything related to inputs for manufacturing, for agriculture, pharmaceuticals, COVID-related products, in that range, you're definitely a top priority. And then after, depending on the rest of the type of product, you can down to priority 2, 3, or you'll get in the backlog. Which means that you could be waiting usually for your import between 3 months to 18 months, depending on the type of product. And depending also on the relationship you have with a bank and the level of foreign currency you generate yourself to be treated as a top priority customer. So it's a bit of a mix and it's very challenging. And I invite anyone who would like to invest in Ethiopia to indeed take this into consideration. We have the advantage recently to have had the private sector, the telecom sector privatized partially. So 2 licenses were floated for bid. One was won by a consortium with Vodafone, Safaricom, CDC, and another investor for infrastructure. This brings cash to the country. It was $850 million that was transferred last week to the coffers of the country. And there is another license that was not awarded that will be put back for bid soon. And there are other type of deal or setup or bid that the government will put forward to try to attract more foreign currency. But the situation remains dire in terms of foreign currency. And I think it's important to really look at the way you want to approach the country depending on your strategy. If you want to be looking to distribute only your product, either as a first stage or as a strategy for your approach to Ethiopia, it's very important that you take this into consideration and that you clearly have identified a partner that is either an exporter, meaning that he or she has access to foreign currency at a certain level and commits to reallocate part of it to your partnership, or you need to find people who can develop extremely good relationship with the bank because they are big enough, because they are well known and they are respected on the markets. And if you don't do that, you will not be surprised if it takes 6, 8, 9, 10 months before your first container is reaching Addis Ababa, despite the fact you may have an agreement on price and everything with your distributor, importer distributor. On other hand, if you want to be investing, I think the strategy can be slightly different. knowing that the country should be floating the currency in 12 months average, maybe 12, 18 months. You should be already looking at someone who's much more focused on strong operation, industrial background, someone who's maybe less benefiting today from the foreign currency issue, but someone who's much more focused on building something that will be a good fit for your business as a partner. So it's very important to look at that. You have to remember that except for some few sectors, most of the time you will be able to invest by yourself. You could be 100% foreign investment. And this can be checked very easily. There is a very clear law. So you need to be careful about, you always have obviously people explaining that it is a must to have a local partner, but beware that regulatory wise, it may not be for you, depending on the sector. Also, interesting point is that Ethiopia has developed quite a few industrial parks, which are really favored in terms of incentives by the government. So you will have benefits of duty-free exemption, tax exemption on your income tax of the company, longer and easier access to work permit for foreigners, all your technicians and senior management at the beginning, guaranteed access to electricity and water, and electricity is one of the cheapest of the continent. It's not always there, but it's one of the cheapest of the continent. And you will have a preferential treatment in terms of logistic and clearance and other things like that. So it's interesting to look at that. One last thing I would like to say in terms of maybe of business culture, I will reconnect to Ethiopia being a country with a very long history, never been colonized, a country that is which is rightfully very proud of its roots and history. Dealing with Ethiopian partners is sometimes quite surprising for people who are accustomed doing business on in other countries on the continent. You really have a cultural exception in this country, and I would strongly suggest that when you come to Ethiopia, you come with an open mind and you really focus on building relationship on the long term. And not jumping immediately into business and trying to close or talk about money. In Ethiopia, a lot has to be done in terms of gaining trust before being able to really talk about doing something together, financially speaking. So it's a very challenging, but a very attractive country in terms of opportunities. And our team here is really happy to support you and advise you if you have any specific project. We can help you see the feasibility and to take the best approach, so you can take great benefits of all the opportunities that you can find here. Thanks a lot for listening. I really appreciated your time, and please contact us if you need anything on Ethiopia or Sudan. Have a nice day.